The Wellness Show, episode 108. And by the way, watch right to the end. We have a special offer for everyone.
Welcome to The Wellness Show, a podcast on health and wealth. I'm your host, Tyson Bannigan, the founder of the Extraordinary Healing Arts Academy. Join me as we get the latest insight, tips, and strategies from wellness providers, coaches, and successful, heart-centered entrepreneurs, and much, much more. So welcome to The Wellness Show, and today we have Gary Bobroff on the call, and we're going to talk about archetypes. What are archetypes, and how do they have significance and meaning in our lives? And it's an interesting term. I come to it by way of Jung, but for some of you out there, you may not even have any idea what an archetype is. So let's start with that. Well, that's not pretty rude. Why don't you introduce yourself first? How did archetypes come into your life? How did you get interested in this anyway?
Thank you. As you said, my name is Gary Bobroff, and I'm the developer and facilitator of Archetypal Nature. And how it came to me was about 20 years ago. The very first sort of personal growth workshop that I ever did was on the material that I teach. And it really spoke to me of the patterns underneath our awareness that influence why we act the way we do. Why does one person have one experience and it's awesome, and another person have the same experience and they hate it? Why is one person drawn towards something, another person repelled? So there's these underneath our awareness patterns that really define so much of who we are. And that first workshop I did that was on the same material really lit me up, and I really had I knew this is something I wanted to study for the rest of my life. So it became really fascinating, and I went on from there to go to UBC and get a degree in philosophy, and then go to Pacifica Graduate Institute in California and get a master's in counseling there, and do many things since then. But that's how I originally came to the work, and what interests me about it, what got me in the door with it anyway.
So could you talk about archetypes in the sense of, in the aspect of consciousness between the conscious mind, the wake part of our mind, and the subconscious and archetypes? Could you sort of explain how all that works, and how most of who we are and how we show up in the world is really coming from archetypal forces that for most of us we're not even aware of?
Sure. Yeah. Well, what Jung was talking about is that he found that we have what's called the collective unconscious, that there's these archetypal forms, these patterns that we all share underneath our awareness, and that they're the same, they were the same in Greece 2,000 years ago as they are today, more or less, that there's these universal collective patterns that we have. In some mythologies, that's the gods, right? So you have a god of war and a goddess of love, and these different energies. Well, that's what archetypes are. They're these different energy patterns inside us. And, you'll see in a family that one kid is maybe really sporty, and one kid is really, maybe into academics, and one kid is a real rebel, and one kid is really, fits with the family system and is maybe the golden child, or the one that's going to have the responsibility in the family. So there's a way that our innate personality is informed tremendously by these forces inside us, and we call them archetypes. They're these energies that are the stamp of our character. So for one person, they might be really drawn to goal achieving and success, maybe sports, things we would associate with the warrior. For another kid, they might be drawn to things of the inner world, or the scientific understanding, or something like that. We use the term sage for that. So there's these different patterns that were just stamped on us at birth, or however you want to say it, but that you can have two kids from the same family and they're drawn to completely different things. That's built into human nature. And that's why we call the work archetypal nature, because there's this different kinds of patterns are built in. And when we look at it from what I do, there's two key things that you see, is that there's different ways that people find identity and fulfillment. So that there'll be an archetype or two archetypes in their life, two modes or way of being in the world that are really primary for most people, and that define what gives them fulfillment, what gives them the sense of, who they are and where they belong. And that will happen in different ways for different people based on the archetypes that they're most attracted to.
So if I knew my archetypes and how I would understand more about how I'm showing up in my life and why I'm showing up the way that I am, and is that correct, or would that give me some ideas about what's going on in my life and why I'm driven to do whatever I feel I need to do? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. There are, in the work I do, there's 4 different essential archetypes, and the ones that speak to you the most are going to define, what is most important to you, what you have an urgency to connect with in your life. So, as I said, someone who might be the warrior archetype in them might be really motivated to goal achieve, be successful. Maybe it's maybe as a business person, whatever it is, that's going to be primary for them. So I think, there are all these different ways of being in the world, and archetype is a way that we understand that. But it's, again, defined primarily by identity and fulfillment. So different people are going to find that in really opposite ways. And it's one of the ways we can understand the tensions in our culture. It's one of the ways that we can understand the tension in our families. Why is it that we don't get along with this family member, or we don't connect with them? So much of what we talk about in archetype has to do with that, and has to do with why we are the way we are, why we value what we value, why we have the relationships we have, why we there's different kinds of people. Some people really tend to have the same sort of relationships over a long period of time. Some people will leave whole groups of friends and have new ones even into adulthood. So there's really different ways of being, and your archetype is a way of understanding that pattern beneath consciousness, that it's something we aren't aware that we're doing, but we're doing it. We take it for granted. It's the air we breathe, right? It's why we do what we do. So we have these different patterns, and being able to understand them and see them and recognize them in ourselves and other people lets us understand our own story better, but it also allows us to be much more patient and understanding of people that are different from how we are.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me, that, we tend to think that everybody in the world sees the world in the way we do and interprets it that way. And you're saying, well, wait a minute, there's key archetypes, and we have, probably 2 predominant in our lives. So there's a certain mix of what we think is the way people should show up in the world. And if we're interpreting the world that way, then we're missing the beauty of the other people that show up with other archetypes, and therefore miss the profundity of how unique we are as diverse people. I think that's part of what you're saying. It helps us really, I guess, say more civilized.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and certainly more understanding of each other. And one of the key tensions that this work makes clear is that there's a big divide in our culture, and in every culture, between folks that are inherently collective oriented. That means that their energy unconsciously is flowing into the team, into the work family, into the family, into the school group, into their group of the parent group they might be in, their social world, the collective relationships that they're a part of. As I said, that can be your social group, that can be your family group, that can be your work group, but your energy is unconsciously flowing into that. That's where you find identity. It's through those relationships. Well, there's a whole other slice of people in the world that are finding their identity through their individual one-on-one connections. And those connections might have nothing to do with each other. They're not collective at all. They're just a series of individual connections. So, some people find their identity through their romantic relationships. And even if that relationship isn't current, it can be a source of identity that goes forward with your life. You understand who you are through your friendships, through your romantic relationships, through your own individuality and uniqueness and the different things you're bringing. And so there's an inherent tension in our society between those 2 kinds of folks as well. And so these differences in who we are at a very profound level, lead to us not liking people that are different from us when we're unconscious of it. But when we get conscious of it, we can say, hey, I see they're getting their identity in a different way, and I'm getting my identity in my way. And so then we can be accepting and understanding and get beyond being judgmental and not liking other people, and can start to see the different ways that people are. And it takes all kinds, right, to make the world go around.
Yeah, I could see how, in a perfect world, if we understood this politically, how it would make much more sense, instead of being on one pole or the other and thinking that everybody needs to move over to your pole, that we could start to look for the common ground, knowing that we're always going to come from two different perspectives, are actually maybe four or even more, and that's okay, that those are all part of the human drama and all have the value to bring to it. But, really, we're so used to polarity and love it, because we think that's our identity. So you mentioned two of them. You mentioned sage and you mentioned warrior. So maybe you could talk about the others. Just mention them.
Sure. Well, let me start with that. So the basics, and I'll start with the masculine stories, and then I'll talk about gender in a moment. But the basic system, and the system that I teach, comes from Tony Wolff, who was very close to Jung, and it came to me through a series of teachers. Tony originally did the feminine forms that we'll come back to in a moment, but we'll start with the masculine. So we have the warrior and the sage, and both those are impersonal archetypes. So they're not about people. So the warrior is about, doing and achieving and running up the mountain as quickly as he can. And he doesn't really care if there's someone there to see it or not, not achievement for its own sake. And opposed to that is the sage, who's about understanding. So in your work life, that might be the sales team that's out there hitting their goal every week versus the R&D people that are developing your next product, right? There's often a tension in companies between those two wings. Well, there's a tension because they're very different people with very different sets of values and very different things they want out of life. That's the impersonal axis. It goes east-west on the chart that we do it. The north-south axis has to do with people. That's the personal axis. And as I said a moment ago, the top, or the northern part of the chart, we call that father-mother or king-queen, and that has to do with folks that are oriented toward the collective. And that is the collective family, the collective work group, as I said. The other end, we have seeker and companion. Seeker in the masculine story. Those folks tend to be answering the question, who am I? Interested in all of that, interested in the individual, in the personal growth stuff, in the new, what is coming out new and fashionable, in authenticity, in intimacy, in all of those personal one-on-one spaces and the personal space itself. They're seeking, they're interested in the who am I question. The opposite of that, as I said a minute ago, we call that father. You can associate it with the crown. Those folks tend to know who they are, know what they want, get their identity from their collective, see themselves as a part of their town, their team, and that's where their identity comes from. So if you're threatening that, they're threatening them, right? If you're threatening the tribe, that's a threat to them. So very different energies. But you can come to an understanding of each other through understanding that you're different. And so that's the personal axis. And there's a tremendous amount of depth there. In the work I do, we do series 1 and series 2, and it can go on from there. But there's so much tension inherent on just that axis between what we call the father and the seeker. I mean, so much of it, think of the 50s and father knows best versus the 60s, right? Like that was one archetype really getting pumped up, the father in the 50s. And then in the 60s, the seeker is kind of rising up saying, hey, whoa. There's some different people in the world here with different values. And the father type folks, father-mother type folks, tends to be emotionally invested in their tribe. So that means if you criticize their town, state, country, company, family, whatever, you're really stepping on some emotionally, you're criticizing them. You're gonna get their backs up.
Right.
So you have to understand that, and that's one of the inherent tensions in our culture, is between folks that are one way or the other. And you can see that really pronounced in the 50s versus the 60s, or in a whole bunch of ways about valuing what is goodness. Is goodness being a part of that collective, or is goodness in the individual search for who I am, like Jack Kerouac and On the Road and all that. So, which is where is goodness to be found? Is it found in the family and the flag and that, or is it an individual thing? So one's not right, one's not wrong, but that's how the tension is set up in culture.
I can see that playing out in a larger sphere too. When I think about that in Kuhn's, structure of scientific revolution, that you have the status quo, or the father knows best, or don't question authority. This is the way we make decisions. This is the body of knowledge. Don't question it. And then the perturbations happen by the quester, the seeker, the one just trying to discover the new way of being or the new scientific revolution. And, it takes a certain amount of energy until that literally that rigidity of the way things were gets broken. And then we have second order change. So I can see that this not only plays out at the personal level, but can play out at the societal or in the raising of consciousness over time.
Yeah, or in any system where you have the people that are defending the collective status quo versus the people that are inherently drawn to finding the new, inherently drawn to, there's a way we could do this better. So in a lot of organizations and systems and cultures and countries and nations, there's that tension between the defenders of the status quo and the people that really, that see what the next step is.
You're that's
absolutely right.
It's an interesting dynamic tension. So let's go on with that. So that's one of the polarities, a huge one. And what about the lateral one? East-west.
Yeah, the east-west, as I said, that's the warrior versus the sage. So the warrior is your get it done kind of guy. You go on a construction site, a lot of those dudes are going to be warriors. They're out there seeing, pushing against the elements and seeing, getting it done every day, and I have to be motivated by challenge to do that kind of work, right? They have to be motivated by it's crappy out here, but here I go. So that energy versus the sage and understanding. And I'll talk briefly here about the feminine forms. I know we don't have too much time. So the feminine forms, we talk about Amazon, which is very much like warrior. And with the sage, we have the mediatrix, which is a word that Tony Wolff gave us. And that's the medial woman, the woman who knows through the unconscious, who knows without knowing why. And of course, all these stories have a shadow, but in our culture and in the Western world, we have literally have the witch burnings and all this, where we put the woman who knows through the unconscious, knows in the mediumistic way, put her to death. So there's a huge bias in our culture against that. And one of the things that Tony saw was that this is an inherent part of human nature, is that there are these people, men and women, and any of these stories can be you can switch the genders, and we don't even worry about the gender piece really, it's just the energy we're describing. So with the mediatrix, it's that knowing through the unconscious, it's that knowing without knowing why you know. And almost every culture in human history has made a place for that. We'll call it the shaman or the, medicine person, those kind of things. So you find that everywhere except in Western culture, where we've become really, really caught up in rationality, and we think that that point of view isn't valid, when it has a tremendous validity. And I'm really glad to be bringing it out into the world and making a place for it. And then the other way, we have mother versus companion. And again, a woman might feel more comfortable identifying as seeker. A man might choose to identify as with the feminine stories. That's fine. We're just using gender to illustrate archetype, not archetype, to tell you anything about gender. So with the mother versus the companion, the mother might be a business person, might be the mothering type, might be, getting her satisfaction through raising kids, but it might be working in the community. I think Jane Goodall would be an example of a mother type out in the world, very well known. All of her wisdom she brings is about what can the individual do to make the collective a better place. So that would be a way of seeing how the mother is serving the collective, but it's in a very different way than we might have thought about it so far in this discussion. The companion is that energy in men and women that is about the intimacy and romance and being present for someone so that they can bloom. It's what people are doing in therapy. The presence of another allows you to come into a greater revealing of yourself, a greater version of who you are. And that's, as I said, that's what we're doing in therapy. So that companion energy is a beautiful energy, and it's deserves to be respected in our world as well, right? We tend to sort of put down that energy to some extent, but I think, again, that's another archetype that we need to say, hey, that's a valid thing to do in the world, is support another person. How beautiful. So that's the basic outlay of the system. And then everybody would be one or two. Some people might just be one, but most folks are at least a little bit of a second one. And then you put those two things together, and there could be tension between them. I'm a seeker and a sage in our system. So there's not only both those, but there's a tension between the two. Do I want to go study, or do I want to go party?
Right. Right.
Or something on a date. So, we expound on that to a tremendous depth and really can go really deep with that, but that's the basic layout. So if you understand that different people are going to behave differently and they have a different motivation for why they behave that way, then you can understand them and support them and be, less reactive. I mean, a lot of people find that this sort of defuses their instant reactions. Oh, I don't like that person, or that kind of person I don't like. So that gets diffused a little bit. You go, okay, well, there's different people in the world, and you can accept that. And there's also a tremendous amount of self-acceptance. And depending on what story you are, there's going to be really different life challenges.
Yeah. So do you help then people understand what their archetype is and how to be comfortable with their archetype, or what to expect, what shows up, or how to deal with the sort of conflict that would come up in being with another, or living with another archetype, or those sorts of things?
Absolutely. Yeah. We start that process, and it really starts with understanding that there is a different motivation and giving them the capacity to talk about it. I've worked with someone before where the father was a father warrior type, and then was married to what we'd call a seeker Amazon, or companion Amazon type, where he's really thinking about the family first all the time. And she's, supportive of that, but she needs a little bit of her own time too. And when you have this archetypal language to speak to each other, you can then say, hey, that's great. I'm there to support you, but I need occasionally some time to go and do my own thing. And you can understand why each other needs those different things and give each other permission. So it allows you to give each other what you both need and get what you need from each other. And I think that's, the beginning of a beautiful increase in self-understanding.
Yeah, that sounds very, very powerful, to be able to have that language and of knowingness about what the other person needs, which may be completely different than what you need in the moment, and being able to honor that. And I would think that that's really would be helpful in the group. So I would think that, a supervisor, or dealing with a whole group, if he understood the needs and wants from this perspective, he might be able to move through conflict resolution or consensus team building much quicker. Would that be true?
Absolutely. And give the different team members what they need. Because all your team members, are going to fit in these different categories and these different archetypes, and they're going to need different things. If you're a warrior, you want a real clear goal.
Yeah.
So you want to, here's the goal, have I achieved it or not? The sage doesn't care about the goal. He cares about, do we understand how all this is working, and what is, what's going on in the mechanics of the system. Is the system set up right? All that kind of totally different. One's not better or worse, but they're completely different. So as a boss, you can see the different characters in your office and give them what they need, and see the value, and see that an office does take a lot of different kinds of folks to work together. And so if you have this understanding, you can say, wow, aren't we lucky to have this person and that person, and let them know that they're valued in the way that they want to be valued. Tell them, it's so wonderful that you achieve these goals, or it's so wonderful that you're the glue of the office, or whatever it is.
So do you have the opportunity to go in and help teams do that, or is that a specialized way of using the archetypal work, or
Yeah, I would love to be doing that. I'm not doing too much of that right now, but I'd certainly love to do that more. Yeah, and I'd also like to bring it to political campaigns as well, because it enables you to understand the voters and what they're looking for from you. So I think going forward, the political piece will be a big part of the work I do as well.
Well, that's a really radical concept when I think about it, because politics has so been polarized, certainly in the United States. The whole idea that we need to learn how to work together is the antithesis of what seems to be presented. But what an amazing experience that could be if we realize that the agenda is to work together to come to a common realization or goal, and we have pieces of the puzzle to do, and certain archetypes are more skilled in certain areas, and we work towards a collective vision rather than this my way or the highway, or whatever it is you want to call what we're doing. Sort of to move out of the gong show approach to politics would be very refreshing.
Sounds good.
So how else? I mean, we have 4 minutes to go. So what other sort of things, because you've really been working in this area for a long time, not only as an academic, but bringing it into practical reality. And so when you look at this work and your passion about what you want to deliver to the world, where do you see going with this? I mean, political is big. I get that. That would be a huge undertaking. Very exciting if somebody could support that. Maybe a foundation could help you do the research on that, and to actually be able to go and speak about that. That's a big one. What other ones that might be on the horizon that you see?
Well, I mean, the first thing for me that I'm going to do with the work right now is write a very introductory book. So I'm going to write, the first half of this year, I'm going to write a very basic book about this work and put it out. And then after that, I see a series of other books, because there's a lot of ways to open this material up to different people and to have it out there. And I think, that is the key of sort of building a foundation and having, before you write about the politics, you need to write about the basics of these archetypes. So that's how I see going forward with it. And the website for folks, if they want to find out more about it, is archetypalnature.com, archetypalnature.com. And we're on Facebook too, facebook.com/archetypalnature. You can follow us there.
So what's the last thing, we have about 30 seconds. What's the last thing you'd like to leave with everybody?
Well, that this can really transform your life and let you accept your story and accept the people in your family and your world with more generosity and have a better feeling for who you are, and see we're going through life so blind sometimes with the story just going over and over again. And I think this can snap you out of it and accept yourself and understand yourself better, and accept and understand others. And I think that's what we're here to do. So.
Yeah, it's time to get out of our own story and accept other people's. Well, thank you very much. I enjoyed this immensely, and I'm in your course and I'm loving it. And I'm really excited about the next step too, about, seeing how that shows up in movies and our culture and advertising and all the rest. So thank you for being on the show.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right. Bye for now.
Bye.
Hey, thanks for watching right through to the end. We do appreciate you here at the Wellness Show. And to show our appreciation at this wonderful time of year, we're going to be giving away a $50 gift certificate over the next 12 episodes. And at the end of the 12 episodes, we'll be giving a $500 grand prize gift certificate that you can spend at either the Wellness Store or the Extraordinary Healing Arts Academy. Now, how do I get entered in to win this? Simple. Like, share, comment, or subscribe to our channel, and then come over to our Facebook page, The Wellness Show, and let us know that you did so. While you're there, you can also comment and enter into the conversation about the current episode and have answers back from Tyson and the people that were interviewed. So again, like, comment, share, subscribe, and tell us you did so on the Facebook page. It will enter you in to win a $50 gift certificate, 12 of those, or the $500 grand prize gift certificate to be spent at the Extraordinary Healing Arts Academy or the Wellness Show.